Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard Macbeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard.
Nice to be talking to you again.
Hilliard, Greta Thunberg, the climate activist from Sweden, is visiting Alberta, but apparently the Alberta government isn't going to show her any Alberta hospitality, give her a big cowboy hat, and perhaps offer her a big steak. Why wouldn't they want to meet? Is Jason Kenney scared of what appears to be this little tiny girl with a big voice?
Yeah, I guess he's nervous about appearing to even be slightly in favor of anything to do with climate change and global warming, because Alberta's become a very complex place, though. There's an awful lot of people in Alberta that are on different ends of the spectrum in terms of believing in global warming, not believing in it, and wanting to do something about it, and at the other end, I guess, calling it a hoax. But the people in the legislature are overwhelmingly, especially now that the government has changed from NDP to Conservative, are much more likely to be at the end of the spectrum that thinks of global warming as a hoax. So, but I don't know why they wouldn't meet with her anyway, and then afterwards they could still say, "Oh, we don't believe in what she said." But I remember when Neil Young came to town, and of course now he was focused more on the oil sands, and of course he's a guy that's probably lived in California for the last 30 years or so, but he's from Winnipeg, and he's kind of one of ours, but the animosity was very thick about anybody that comes to Alberta and even suggests that fossil fuels are a bad thing. And of course, her message is pretty stark, as I understand it, that we have to eliminate all fossil fuel use in the very near future to have any chance of stopping the climate temperature from increasing too much. And that message wouldn't go over very well at all with the voters in Alberta.
Of course, there's never any harm, usually, just meeting and talking with somebody. Does it show you have a closed mind if you won't meet with people, or can you never have too much information about whatever the subject is? Is that a more measured approach?
Yeah, I don't know. And it's interesting with the premier, the new premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, because he's done something else that's very unusual, and that is he's gone to Ontario to campaign in the current federal election a couple of weeks ago, and I've never heard of that happening before. Obviously, a conservative government in Alberta would probably support a conservative government in Ottawa, but campaigning, that's very unusual. So I don't know what the thinking would be in terms of, I remember years ago they had an international protection for the children. I think it was the United Nations that had it, and they wanted all the legislatures to pass a resolution to protect children from harm. And the Alberta legislature, this would have been in the 80s or late 80s probably, refused to pass it because they said they didn't want families to be told how they were going to raise their children. So anything's possible. And, of course, it's not just Alberta. There's probably parts of Ontario and BC, away from the major cities that would be quite similar.
Well, of course, Vancouver City Council at one point, approved a resolution banning atomic weapons on the moon. So you can, and I remember playing the Star Trek theme as I reported the story, boldly going where they have no business going.
Well, everybody's forgotten Alan Fotheringham, but Lotus Land, that was the comment about the west coast of Canada. Probably pretty apt description.
Sure, we've got thousands of homeless people, but let's worry about weapons on the moon. The International Monetary Fund says the world's economy is slowly grinding to a halt. What's behind that, and is there anything people can do, and what should we be concerned about?
Well, it's very unusual, I think. I normally wouldn't pay much attention to the IMF because they usually just have these very bland reports, but this one really caught my eye, and I think it caught the eye of a lot of people because it's the fifth downgrade in their forecast for the economic growth in 2019, 2020. You know, that's by itself very unusual. And they talk about things like the developed countries, which we know that in Europe, like Germany, is probably already in recession. We know that in the United States, the rate of growth has been downgraded, but it's still pretty good, even 10 years after the last recession. The rate in Canada, the growth rate's probably about 1.5%, which is pretty poor compared to the history. But the big thing is the growth rate in China. So China, starting in 1980, had this phenomenal growth, and for many years they were growing at 10% a year. Now the numbers from China, as I think you and I have discussed before, are somewhat suspect, but certainly they did a tremendous amount of growth, whether the actual number was exactly 10% or not. But now they're talking about below 6%, and that's a pretty big slowdown. And so when they combine Europe, the U.S., Japan, which of course everybody knows the growth is very slow there because of a lack of immigration, very elderly population. Europe, Japan, China, and the U.S. together, they've got the rate of growth down below 3.5%, 3.25%, I think is the number. These are very low numbers that we've really never seen before. And the problem with that is that makes up a very significant percentage of the world's, I think it's about 50% of the world's economy, GDP, as measured by GDP. So if that slows any further, anything below 3%, or even maybe a little bit lower than that, is considered almost a recession for global economy. And global synchronized recession is something we haven't seen for a long time. So that's the alarm, and they're raising the alarm. And what they say is, the report's 208 pages long. I didn't get through the whole report, but what they say is that monetary policy has lost its ability to fix these things, and of course that the only other tool that governments have is fiscal policy, and that is going to be difficult, partly because a lot of countries have run up their debt levels very high. They ran them up to bail out the banks after the global financial crisis in 2009, and they haven't been lowering their debt levels since then. So for them to go deeper into debt to stave off a global recession by spending more money and going deeper into debt, that's a pretty tall order, and there's going to be a lot of debate about that, and I don't know if governments will be able to convince their voters that that's the right thing to do.
Well, of course, now Canada and the U.S. have legislation that allow bank bail-ins. In other words, they can dip into your bank account to keep them from going under instead of looking for a government bailout. Is that a concern?
Well, and of course, what happens then, of course, is the consumer. Imagine what the consumer would do in that instance. What would they do? Take their money and put it in a container and bury it in the backyard? We go back to, the Federal Reserve, the central bank, was created in 1913 entirely for the reason that they wanted to reassure people they could leave their money on deposit at the bank rather than keep it at home in a jar, and that because before that, well, and even after that, but especially before that, it was just a continual situation where people would get frightened about a bank failing and they pull all the money out of the bank, which would obviously then cause the bank to fail. And so I don't have a lot of optimistic feelings about this new legislation. they passed a whole bunch of legislation after the 2009 fiasco with the banks that needed to be bailed out. But I think we'll probably find out they created a set of new problems. One of the legislations, other than that bail-in one you mentioned, is the U.S. government passed a law that said that they're not allowed to bail out banks like Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and Bank of America like they did last time. It's forbidden. So if we get another recession and some of those banks get in trouble, the theory anyway, I don't believe that it'll happen in practice, but the theory anyway would be they just watch them fail. And that would be very interesting.
We'll have more with Hilliard Macbeth right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, they're talking about, of course, they want people to move from internal combustion engines to electric cars, but would that make an immediate impact on the environment? And is it, in fact, practical right now?
So the transportation segment of the total of global emissions in carbon, CO2, there's actually several gases but let's just focus on that one, is not the largest component. So it's only about 15%. Now there's a lot of talk about airplanes, for example, and we started out talking about Greta Thunberg. Well, they were criticizing her for flying on a jet to get here, and but the airplane is only 5%, and the total, including cars, is only 15%. So the big one, at 50% of the total, is the production of electricity and the production of heat. And the reason that one's so large is because still in the world, most of that comes from coal. So they burn coal, they make it heat, they take water and they make it into steam, and then they turn a turbine and they create electricity that way. Or they use natural gas or other fossil fuels to heat your house or to heat your factory or whatever. So, even if they converted all of the vehicles, cars and buses and trucks, to electric tomorrow, then there would be a big gain in terms of efficiency, because the internal combustion engine is much less efficient than the electric motor, but it still wouldn't make much more than, say, a 10% reduction in the total amount of emissions that go into the atmosphere. So there's and of course the other one it's very big as well is agriculture. So we could talk about agriculture, and I'm sure Greta Thunberg will tell if she gets to Alberta and she's allowed to talk, which is two big ifs, I guess. She might explain all that to us, but so just doing cars alone wouldn't be enough. And of course, then there's a whole question about the number of people that are employed in the automobile industry. And one of the reasons, in fact, the main reason that we were talking about the IMF report in the details, one of the main reasons for the slump is the slowdown in automobile sales. And it's a big part of industrial production worldwide. And there's about 80 million cars produced every year. And there's quite a slowdown in the production and the sales. And so if all of those people had to switch over to electric tomorrow, there would be hundreds of factories employing millions of people that would have to be shut down. and especially in countries like Germany and the United States. So it wouldn't solve the global warming problem. I personally drive an electric car, so I think it would be a good thing, but it's just not enough. It's not even close to being enough to solve the problem of global warming.
And of course, if everybody switches to electric, there go the shops like Mr. Lube and Jiffy Lube. They won't be needed.
No, it's interesting. The average maintenance cost on an automobile in the United States is $1,000 a year, and I remember it when I had a car as being higher than that. But and there's 300 million cars, so it's a $300 billion industry. And with the electric, there's virtually there's none of that maintenance. Most of that maintenance has got to do with the internal combustion engine. Some of it would be tires and stuff like that, which the electric car still would have to. You still have to buy new tires. In fact, with an electric car, you have to buy new tires more often. But most of that $1,000 per car is related to the motor and the oil change and the spark plugs and all that kind of stuff. So that would be gone. So so you got the oil and gas industry, you got the automobile manufacturing industry, you got the automobile dealers who make most of the money from maintaining those cars. It's a big deal. So no wonder there's some hostility towards people that claim that we have to go green, and we have to do it by the end of next month, kind of thing.
We'll have more with Hilliard Macbeth right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, what's happening in Canadian housing? Is there a big rebound, or is it because last year was so bad, this year looks better or good?
Well, the Globe and Mail's headline, and there's been several headlines. Bloomberg had one, Globe and Mail had one. I'm sure all of the Toronto Star, I didn't see it, but I'm sure they did. They all have said that there's a big recovery underway because sales have jumped. I think the numbers are sort of like 22% or something. Now prices in Toronto have gone up a little bit. Prices in Vancouver are still falling. Prices in Edmonton and Calgary are still falling. So there's quite a difference between Toronto and the rest of Western Canada, especially. But the number of sales has rebounded dramatically. So that's taken as, in fact, some economists working for major lenders have announced that the soft landing is here and the downturn is over, and now we're we're back into the upturn again, which to me is ridiculous. I've discussed that many times in many interviews about the fact that, first of all, there are no soft landings after a bubble of this magnitude that have been identified in history going back 50 years. And secondly, if after such a mild downturn, I think prices are maybe down 10 to 15% at the most in parts of Toronto and Edmonton and Calgary. The only place where prices are down enough to say that maybe it's sufficient is in Vancouver, in the very high-end part of the market where prices are down 50%. But leaving that aside, prices haven't come down nearly enough to restore affordability. So that would mean if the recovery is underway, as some claim, that we'd be going right back to extremely unaffordable very quickly, especially in Toronto. So most of these reports are emanating from Toronto, and of course Toronto is very, very focused on real estate and real estate development. It's got to be the number one industry when you count lending, banking, and real estate sales and construction of high-rise. There's something like 105 cranes in Toronto, which is more than the combined total of New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and Chicago. But so it's a big deal for Toronto. But I think that in the end, Toronto will succumb to the same thing that Vancouver, Edmonton, and Calgary have succumbed to, which is prices are too high, and people can't afford it, so therefore prices have to come down. It's pretty basic logic, and it happens every time when you have a housing boom. There is a bust afterwards.
Should people wait longer to see if prices come down more, or are people just going to stop selling?
Well, I think the thing to watch for is listings. So there's been a drop in listings, and I think what's happened is people have a price in mind, the anchor price, I call it in my book. It's some kind of price. I don't know what everybody's different, but some price that a house sold for a couple of years ago before the downturn started. And I know that my house is a better house than that one, and it sold for $900,000. So therefore, I'm not selling mine for less than $900,000. So they put their house up for sale in that price range. It doesn't sell. So instead of lowering their price to $800,000 or $700,000 or whatever the market is, they pull it off the market. And then the headlines come out that the recovery is underway, and that just confirms their view that they should keep it off the market until it gets back to that magical $900,000 price. So until that mentality is broken and people actually start listing their houses for what they're really worth, then buyers should wait, because I guess you could go to those people. I mean, we have dozens of examples in the neighborhood that I live in. Walk the dog around, I look at all the signs, and I see them. They go up, they come down. I talk to some of the people, and they all have that problem that there's a price at which they will not go below. So, but time usually takes care of that, because people need to move, or they pass away, and then the beneficiaries of their estate just want to get it sold and get it done and divide up the money and move on with their lives. So, or the lender, if there's a recession and they lose a job and they can't make their payments anymore, the lender takes over and sells those. And the lenders usually don't care. They just dump it on the market and just say sell it for whatever you can get for it. So this process is taking a lot longer than anybody, including me, thought it would. But I wouldn't chase prices until they've come down by a significant amount. So 10% to me is not significant. 35% is a significant amount. And that's what I would look for.
Hilliard, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Nice to be on your show.
My guest has been Hilliard Macbeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. His website, macbethgroup.com. If you have any questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.